In this podcast, we're going to be explaining how Stephen Miller, the political advisor, is basically a complete and utter political cancer to wherever he goes. Now, obviously, you can start looking at him and you can see how he is uh, essentially, uh, his viewpoints are completely backwards to what conservatism is. And he's completely against the ideas of where Ronald Reagan comes from, saying where Reagan stated that the cornerstone of conservatism is libertarianism, and he completely disagrees with this point, and he has been one that's anti-immigrant and believes in nationalism, which is basically what has destroyed the whole country of Venezuela. Venezuela has adopted nationalism since the mid 1970s, and it has been a slow and steady crash since that point. And we've seen basically this is an idea that was brought on by the New Left, which is why people like Peter Navarro actually support this whole idea as well, which is why Peter Navarro was in the White House. This is not exactly an idea of the right wing, is actually a left wing idea. Now it's basically brought in by the people that when the left wing started to adopt this idea of throwing away the KKK, this is what they end up doing. Now, obviously, when they did that, that essentially created an opening, and that's why and this is why we had these groups bring up the idea of this white genocide just by immigrants breeding more than whites do. And this has been an idea from eugenicists for a long time. That's why they side with eugenicist groups. He's one of them, and you could find this information out there. There's plenty of it. That's why he shared stuff from VDare as well as what's the other group? The other group is uh, what's the other one for immigration? Fair, FAIR. And what you're going to find with them is you're going to find that they're actually one that's actually one that's is actually that's their fair is actually linked to both Planned Parenthood and the Sierra Club, both eugenicist groups, but they actually left. Their founders left because they felt that they didn't go far enough. They felt the idea of targeted abortions and such things with genocide, with essentially genocide of those groups, was not good enough. They felt that they just needed to flat out block them from entering the country. And that's where the group actually came about. Uh, and when you look at that, that's where they actually come about from that. Now, you can actually look at all of that, but what we're going to look at this specifically is actually looking at what he's actually done to people in the actual party and how much damage his viewpoints when he's actually put them into as an advisor, and what they've actually done as that, and what it's actually gone through, and where it's actually become a problem for that point. When we actually see this, we actually see, first of all, we'll look at Michelle Bachmann. This is one where he became an advisor for her. Now, she was considered uh, as a potential winning on these straw poll in 2011, but dropped out in January 2012 after finishing sixth in the Iowa caucuses. Now, he was considered a top advisor for her, and then she left out of office in 2015, so she was basically not far past that with it, and basically most of her insane rhetoric was pushed basically from him, and a lot of the ideas on the things when it comes down to insane ideas of immigration and some of the things with that where she's basically abandoned the original ideas on some of these more libertarian ideas where she's thrown it to the wind. And this is where she was able, the reason why she was able to be killed is because on the stage we saw Ron Paul obliterate her. And we saw this because of what ended up happening because of what this occurred. And this is just something in which happened because of what she ended up doing. And we see that when she brought him on, that ended up killing her career. John Shadegg, with it, he was basically in office up to 2011. This is in the U.S. House of Representatives from Arizona. This is another one with it. And this basically is another one that basically is through pushing a lot of things through his stuff with it is he ended up losing out as well. And you're talking is through the whole thing with it is he ended up retiring because the fact is his statement was that he wanted to pursue it through a different venue. This was basically would be considered garbage because he would have known that he would not have won it because obviously the Phoenix people in the Phoenix area were actually changing. Jeff Sessions, obviously, as we know, with it when he started to push a lot of the different things, initially came in office in 1997 with it. He was made the U.S. State's Attorney with it, nominated by Ronald Reagan in 1981. And basically he's been in office he was in office for quite some time. Left as the Attorney General in 2018. And he had his connections with him. He was actually an advisor with Miller was actually an advisor with him during his time as a senator. Yet when he tried to run again, if you look at his electoral history, you saw that when he tried to run again, that should be up here, is he could not even get he couldn't even get 40% of the election in 2020 in the election runoff where he for the actual nomination. He got killed by Tuberville. That shows you right there with it. And yet Tuberville has shown that he doesn't even know the different sections of the government. Tuberville is basically just as bad as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when it comes down to knowledge of government. And this should be kind of an idea of how bad of the damage that Stephen Miller actually did to him when it comes to Dave Bratt. Dave Bratt left in January 2019. Now, if you were actually when he lost his re-election bid to Democrat Abigail Spanberger, this should be a kind of a little bit of a key when it comes down to it. This is showing all of the cases with it. You had basically one retirement with it in which they stated that they wanted to go down a different area with it. Actually, two retirements with it in which they're stating, quote unquote, they're going down a different area in which they were known that they could not have won another election. You had another person who tried to run, got killed. Another person who tried to run, they got killed. And another person, which we're getting to next, which is Donald Trump, in which he lost in 2020. This is the whole thing. We see with Donald Trump, Trump lost. And we can see in real clear politics because of what had happened. This right here, right around this time, is the executive order that ended up happening on immigration when it ended up taking place. And basically when it started to go up when they were starting to learn about the carve-outs with it. But when they realized that the carve outs were not going to go across the board, when he's not going to get rid of all of them, that's when he started to plummet. And because they felt that he was not bringing any substance to the election. And that's why we saw when it comes down, and these are betting odds. Betting odds tend to be very, very accurate. And when it comes down to the election, that's why the final average of betting odds with it were 63.8 for Biden and 35.4 for Trump. And I think that that's a clear idea that when we look at it, that it was clearly that Biden was going to win. Obviously, Biden maxed out at around like 66.4%. The spread X was running about the highest percentage, where Biden got up to around 70. Uh, the Unibet was around the lowest, where Biden was at about 59%. And I think we can actually look at this and show that there's actually we can actually see that there's some serious numbers with that, where we can actually see that he was not, where Trump was not going to win. And we could see that it was based on policy on immigration, because it was really less about some of those other things than what some of the policies on immigration and what the policies on his trade war were doing. And these were some of the key policies in which we found what Stephen Miller was doing, what he was pushing for. I mean, you got to think with it. He was basically he's key on the what it called on basically the he's basically his whole thing with it were key on basically the Federation for American Immigration Reform. That's basically, this is the group that's backed by the whole idea of eugenics. This is their whole base on the whole thing. This is their whole basis of everything. This is the whole thing of that whole point. And basically, we have his link to George Nader as well. Obviously, we look to George Nader as a Lebanese American businessman, lobbyist, former Trump advisor to on the presidential transition team, and repeated convicted sex offender. This is another one in 2018 with it. I mean, this is after after he was linked to that with it. This is someone who's basically done that. When it comes down to these things, we can actually see that with it. We can see that we can see that basically is that the whole point of him being there with it was basically to go after number one, go after China with it, which basically we have nothing. China has nothing to do with our problems. Our problems are actually internally, and it has everything to do with monetary issues, in which he does not understand any of that. And yet he he has actually gone with this whole idea of targeting China. And when we start to look at the whole thing with it, is that he has gone basically anybody who has actually tried to have a more basically anybody who's actually had a more compassionate approach with this, such as Christian Nielsen, when she wanted to have it, because she did not agree with the way the immigration was going with it, and she felt it was basically being unduly cruel. She was basically forced out by Miller, and yet Miller is basically a fly-by-night, as we've seen that he's really kind of just gone through. And obviously, at the time with it, we saw that Miller was a huge fan of Boris Johnson. Obviously, I can guarantee you that he's not now. We can see that we can see on the what it called whole thing of when he was that he's basically that he does not believe. This is a person who does not believe in the ideas of the ideas of separation of powers. He believes that basically that they can assume the powers of other things. Um, and he's even gotten what he called criticism by Ilya Shapiro of the Cato Institute. And the and when you're seeing that with it, this shows that they're not what it called that they're not conservative, that they're not anywhere libertarian with the whole idea of it. And he's basically his ideas have been considered fringe at best. He's argued on the whole idea of basically concerning immigrants and the Statue of Liberty with Jim Acosta. Now, while Jim Acosta tends to be a little bit of looking for the ideas of trying to get viral videos, his what it called his little argument with Jim Acosta was completely irrational, and the fact is with it is he's more what it called he's more against what it called keeping people away from the country, and he does not understand the whole thing. And we've seen that basically is he's tried to even be another one that's tried to use the anybody who basically attacks him is anti-Semitic, and the whole thing and this is the whole thing with where they've actually done this, when the fact is he does not even understand the fact of Semitism itself. And we're to be Semitic with it, we have to look up the whole point of where we'd have to look up where we'd have to look up the idea of where what it refers to as is Semitic languages, which is the whole area with it. Right here, you're going to see, and you're going to see the whole area here with it is you'll see Eastern, Central, and Southern Semitic areas with it. Now, in what you'll see with it is you'll see essentially what they accuse is people like Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar was actually technically what would be labeled as Semitic. He accused Ilhan Omar of being anti-Semitic, which is actually wrong. Now, if you look at Stephen Miller's family, you'll actually go back to that, and you'll actually see that if you look at the whole thing with it is his family is originally from Belarus. Belarus is what it is considered to be in its actual country as Europe. So he is not, and I repeat, is not Semitic. This is something where people need to understand a little bit of something, in which they need to understand something called geography. A lot of people think automatically just because someone says, "Oh, I'm Jewish," with it, it makes them Semitic. Guess what? It does not. Semitic is basically is a specific region. Unless you're from one of these areas here, either Eastern, Central, or Southern Semitic, you're not Semitic. And that's the whole thing that people need to grasp is there's when it comes down to it is based off Semitic languages. And what is usually spoken in what it call in a lot of Eastern European Jewish households with it is Yiddish, which is not Semitic. Yiddish is actually another Eastern European language. And this is why when we start to see it, we can see that it becomes more about basically refusing to accept responsibility. And when we start to see that what he's done in his career with it is he's basically forced two people into retirement when they knew that they could not win. He had three people who've lost elections. Now, this is the whole thing in which he's had for his political career. Now, when we start to examine this, we can actually see flat out that he does not have the ability to actually, as an advisor, advise people how to actually win elections. This flat out, we can actually see right now with it. I mean, you can look at the presidential polls with it. We can actually see that his of Political and Morning Consult, this which is actually pretty even poll, because obviously Rasmussen leans right, and Political Morning Consult is going to give you obviously the largest amount with it of people. This shows you that he has a definite disapprove when it comes to polls. Economist YouGov with it tends to be a more left leaning with it. Political Morning Consult is going to be only it's just a bare what it called when you start to rank them with it. It's only a bare with a bare left wing poll, and it's like I think it's only like a 0.6 or 0.8 when it comes down to the shift. And what we see is we can see that he's basically in such a disapproving poll that it's showing that he does not have an approving thing. People are very, very disapproving of what he's done, and this shows you these are essentially the policies of Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller has essentially taken over in his policies. The only positive things in which what we've found are actually Donald Trump's natural things, which are against the policies of Miller. Those are essentially to go against and try to bring people home. Now, the policies against bring all of them home are definitely going to be from people like Stephen Miller, from bringing all the people home from across in other countries. Because obviously Stephen Miller has a long history of people who want people in other countries who want a lot of intervention. And the fact is with it is his hatred of people that are not like him are basically going to do this and have him do that. And that's why he's done this, and frankly he should not even be there. Because he does not he's basically shown that he's not even on the list of people who really have experience in what it really means in any of these policies. Does not have any background in it. When you start to look at his thing at Duke, I mean, his actual background is that he made an actual thing of basically making it a whole point to basically just be as controversial as possible. And this is the whole point. And he was basically backing the whole thing with it. And his conservative union was bringing people like Richard Spencer, And this is a thing within which they were trying to and that yet he tries to he tries to distance himself from Spencer. Yet when we start to see his viewpoints, we can see his viewpoints are not far off, and we can see that his viewpoints on these things, because he's pushed the ideas on this whole idea of this white genocide by mass immigration, which doesn't exist, and he's pushed this white, which is goes under the idea of white identity politics. And this is the whole thing in which we've seen with him, and it's only led to the death of basically every one of these uh, political uh, basically these political machines that he's worked under, and basically these politicians, and they've ended their careers because of what he's done. And we need to understand that basically because of what he's done is he's ended the careers of these people, because he doesn't because of what ideas he's pushed. He's pushed basically insane conspiracy theories and basically policies that the American people are completely against. As the American people become a lot more socially liberal and a lot more economically conservative, he cannot push his ideas, which are far more economically liberal and far more socially conservative, because they're completely backwards from what the actual current people are in with. You cannot say we're going to spend a lot more money because we don't to accomplish these goals, which are against the American against what the American public wants. And you can't be basically spending, you can't be pushing for things that are socially conservative when the world is not becoming socially conservative. The world is becoming more socially liberal, and so is the country. You can't live back. You cannot live back in the progressive era. The progressive era is long dead, and this is the thing with he's trying to bring back. Him and his allies are trying to bring back the progressive era, and it's long dead. And this is the whole point. And he's trying to bring back the FDR era of these policies. And these policies, number one, they fail, and number two, people do not want them. It in either of the two parties, they've rejected them, and that's the whole point. And that's why when it comes down to it, is he becomes death for anyone he works with. And eventually people are eventually I think he's going to have to realize that, and he's either going to have to basically suck it up and basically deal with people and not advise people this way, or he's basically going to have to go into one of these little fringe groups and take a very, very small salary. I mean, he can be in one of these anti-immigration groups and take a tiny salary, because they're just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And we're going to get closer to basically being a more constitutional system, and in which we're going to be closer to the founders, and in which he's not going to like. And this is going to be a thing in which he's going to make a decision. Either A, he's going to have to adopt constitutional ideas, or B, he's going to have to go down with the ship and basically be begging on the street for money. And that's what's going to happen in the end, because he's needs to realize everywhere he goes with it, and people are eventually going to say, I don't want to lose my career by listening to some moron who doesn't know how to actually run anything. Because we see the same thing with a couple of the other advisors that Trump has brought on, such as Peter Navarro and a couple more people like that, that basically they do not know anything, and it's actually caused the downfall of his whole campaign, that he's not been able to accomplish anything. And you get some of these people that maybe he can get an advisor on some station spouting his insane ideas, but that's going to be about it. Now, basically going to leave it here because I think I've gone over the point of basically how cancerous he is as a political advisor. Uh, and I think you can find elsewhere on basically some of his insane conspiracy theories and some of his ideas in which would be completely hate filled, uh, and some of his stuff that he did during his high school years, which are appalling. I'm not going to go over that because that could take like a freaking century. But I think I've gone over that where he's basically been one of the architects to essentially destroy the Tea Party movement. Took something in which was based on the ideas of Ron Paul, and he turned it into basically the ideas of people like Benito Mussolini. To many of them, and so after this, I'd like to basically end this with video, and I'll see you guys later. Bye, everyone.